Now to the Victorian state election, which was a devastating slap in the face for the bedwetting smallest of small L Liberals, smallest of smallest L Liberal Victorians. As for the ABC, its reporters could barely contain their enthusiasm.
Daniel Andrews' historic win cements his status as a Labor legend.
Vindication for a pandemic premier.
Oh, vindication for a pandemic premier, says the ABC state political reporter, except for the fact that, despite imposing the world's longest lockdown and the country's harshest restrictions, Victoria has, and still has to this day, the highest COVID death rate in the country. Not to mention economic devastation, which could explain this.
There were big swings away from Labor in Melbourne's outer north and west, where COVID hit hard.
Now, of course, this election result would surprise no regular viewer of this program. I've been saying and writing all year that Dan Andrews would win in a landslide and that the weak, unprincipled Liberals don't deserve to win. But back to the ABC and Raph Epstein, who was still crowing today.
And I think there are genuine questions some in the media have to answer. If you read the newspapers and watched the TV news bulletins in this state over the last 3 or 4 weeks, you'd be hard-pressed to see the result represented. This is not a radical left-wing government, despite what some of the national media are saying. He builds things, but here in Victoria, they look like mainstream centrist objectives.
Oh, he's doing comedy now. It's funny. Let's ignore for now the ridiculous assertion that the Andrews government is a centrist one. As for Epstein's insistence that some in the media have to answer questions, does that include journalists who fail to ask questions to hold the government accountable? Like the hotel quarantine debacle that resulted in hundreds of deaths and the paralysis of the Victorian economy? This from Epstein last year. Did it help that we spent all that time asking who hired the security guards and why Melbourne? There's a problem with the media, all right. Raph Epstein, and it's the likes of you running cover for Dan Andrews. And the ABC was perpetuating another election aftermath furphy, saying the Libs need to be even more leftist to be competitive.
University of Melbourne politics professor Sarah Madison says it could look to its New South Wales counterpart for inspiration.
I think the New South Wales Liberal Party has, in lots of ways, seen a revival of those kind of core Liberal values and less of this flirtation with the extreme right.
Jeez, I'm sorry, this entire program is turning into some sort of a comedy hour because extreme right, did she really say that? Did she pretty much call the Victorian Liberals Nazis? Is she supposed to be a professor of politics? Extreme right? Really, Professor? Contrary to her claims, it was the opposition abandoning its conservative values that was the problem, not drifting to the right. The Victorian Libs did not have a single conservative or right-wing or even centre-right policy. Now, that's just not opinion. That is just a matter of fact. They backed Labor 100% on everything from radical trans policy to a treaty with the Indigenous community to insane emission targets. The Victorian Liberals veered so far left that they stood for nothing other than high expenditure at a time of record debt and far left social and cultural policies. And guess what? We already have a Labor government delivering that. We don't need Liberal imposters. Politics is supposed to be a contest of ideas, but the Victorian Libs were too terrified to fight. They stood for nothing and they got the drubbing they richly deserved. Another thing they share with Labor is trouble adding up numbers. This is the shadow treasurer the day before the election. He didn't even know the total cost of their policies.
How much did it add to?
I can't give you the top figure, but I can get that for you. Actually, add it all together in a moment. We haven't added it together in a single figure like that, but we can get that for you quite quickly.
Do you not know what it is?
I mean, yeah, why add up figures? You know, what's just billions of dollars of policy promises? You know, well, why have a top figure? So not only did the Liberals fail to provide a single Conservative or centre-right policy, they went out of their way to disenfranchise their base with woke rubbish like this. Feel like a climate change combo? That's what you get when Ronald McDonald is running the opposition. Cola net zero, give me a break. Incidentally, if conservatism is so on the nose, how do you explain this?
As the vote count settles, it's becoming clear the Victorian Nationals have made a decisive sweep of the regions. The party is projected to win 9 seats, picking up at least 3 seats from rural independents.
And the hypocrites were out in full. Let's look at a couple of prime examples. Magda Szubanski, oh goodness me, she tweeted, "It's just so funny that Tim Smith doesn't seem to realise that he majorly helped his party lose, blaming Matthew the Fall guy," haha, clever, misses the fact that the whole party has effed itself by lurching into Trumpian cloud cooker land. Oh, speaking of those in cloud cooker land, Magda, would that include those trying to imply that Jenny Morrison, wife of the former PM, was giving a secret signal to white supremacists? That idiotic take of yours is still up on Twitter, and but the prize, I've got to say, for hypocrisy goes to author, feminist and Sydney Morning Herald columnist Jane Caro, who tweeted, "I'm so relieved that twice now Australians have resoundingly rejected hatred, nastiness, bullying and personal attacks in politics. I'm also cautiously optimistic that American voters are also growing weary of constant outrage and vitriol. Civility rocks." I mean, these people don't own mirrors, do they? This is the same Jane Caro who tweeted on the night of the 2019 election when the Morrison government was re-elected. She said, "Well, Australia may be effed and the whole planet not far behind, but I'm at the best, most brilliant and cool wedding I have ever been to, so I shall just dance and get pissed and stick 2 rude fingers up to the truculent turds who voted to turn backwards." That would be her fellow Australians. Civility indeed.